just an easy way to kind of give a general reason for why we are here today. And it's really to talk about media, but press releases and media advisories are something that we want to get right. Our local media are getting those things all the time. We're going to dig in here to find out when the best time is to send them for them to respond to you, all the way down to the hour, as well as some other details, because it's really important that you guys get this when you talk about promoting your organizations. I want you to look at these three individuals, and tell me what you might think, or you don't have to tell me, but think about what you think each of them has in common. All right. The one thing that each of them have in common is their connection to a nonprofit organization. And each of them has represented that organization in their likeness. The one on the left, obviously, or my left, is Mr. Denzel Washington. We know him as a famous actor. However, he has been very, very bold and very vocal in what the Boys and Girls Club has done for him, how it's fueled his efforts to help support other individuals, and obviously because of that has prompted donations and other people who want to be just like Denzel, right? So those stars who get out there in front of their nonprofit organizations that help them really are a benefit. The same with Mr. Timothy Harrison here. Now, you might not be too familiar with who he is, but he is the student, if you ever heard of the Waffle House story recently, the student whose manager at Waffle House saw that he didn't want to go to graduation and actually held a graduation ceremony for him in the Waffle House. A news agency caught hold of this, put it in the local media right here in Birmingham, Alabama. And from there, he's gotten all kinds of awards, or all kinds of scholarships and recognition. Well, you know who he caught the eye of? Lawson State Community College. And so this individual who probably barely made it through high school, wasn't going to college, now has a full ride to Lawson State. And that was actually a story that they put out to let other folks know what they do. And then over here, if you're a football fan, you are probably very familiar with Mr. Najee Harris. Most people will forever know him as a football legacy, but one of the first things he did once he started getting a bigger platform is let people know about the organization that assisted his family while he was homeless and getting ready to graduate high school and move forward. So each of these individuals' voices have made a significant difference in the areas that they are a part of, but none of this would happen had that story not been told. Once we move from here, I want you to look at all of these organizations, and these might look a little more familiar than those pictures, and think about what you think each of them might have in common. All right. Well, the common denominator for each of them is that each of them has a communications plan. It's apparent in their media that they have clear goals. They also have schedules of when they actually plan out events all throughout the year. I'm sure many of you who have a United Way know about their tour that they do with their queens in the area, going to the different areas that they influence and impact just to raise awareness and dollars for the events that they have coming up and the fundraising goals they have. The same with Relay for Life and March of Dimes. The Atlanta Greek Picnic, that's a newer one to us, I guess, that you may not recognize. But even their media and how they market the events they have coming up are just super, super organized and big. And you can do the exact same thing that they're doing. And I'm going to show you how throughout today. So, what we're going to do is talk about quite a few things, in addition to the fact of what they do and how our successful nonprofit organizations get in front of cameras and get in front of newspaper articles. We're going to figure out how they tell the stories when they do get that access. We're going to talk about why this matters, even though we've talked about that a little bit before, as well as talk about media advisories, the difference between those and press releases. We'll talk about how to follow up, what what questions to ask, what things need to be done in order to ensure that your message was gotten out the way that you wanted it to be. And then we'll do some takeaways, just like we're in class, so that you can make note of these and take them back to your organizations. One of the most important things that you want to think about before you ever jump in front of a media camera or before you ever write an article is the why of why you're doing something in the first place, right? And that's usually buried somewhere within your business plan as you go about your nonprofit, whether it's to help people who are hungry or who are homeless, to help parents be better parents, even watchdog agencies. Hold on one second. Let's see. Somebody is saying that they don't have sound. Can everybody hear? Can you nod a yes if you can hear and a no if you can't? Okay. Auntie, I don't know what's going on then, sister girl. Check your turn your volume up on your phone and see if that works. But you said you can see my lips moving. Okay. So, but yeah, our why, there's so many different whys. We have a lot of nonprofit watchdog agencies, which are a big deal when it comes to COVID. I was actually interacting with a newspaper in the Puerto Rico area who had to stop believing what the government was sending out in relation to COVID and the COVID numbers because everything was so skewed to their favor. So, tons of agencies out there making sure that our communities are impacted in the way that they need to. When you see your why or when you know your why, where does everybody else find out about your why? Where is it? Is it on your website, in your mission, vision, and values? Is it in a board meeting where you go and give your board or the leaders in your organizations a report every month or every couple weeks? Is it in your budgeting? People say that you put your money where your mouth is, and so the things that you believe in, you tend to pay more for or do more for. The important point is wherever your why is, it needs to be where it can have the most impact. So you can have the most noble idea in your community. You can have a heart for a population that may not be well served. But if people don't know that, not only do you not get the clients or reach the people that you want to impact, but you also don't get your message across to those people who could donate and make a bigger impact with the funds that they have to offer. Uh-oh, hold on one second. There we go. Another thing to think about when you think about your why and when you think about telling your own story is that when you get the opportunity to actually tell that story, you get to control your own narrative. Even if you have the biggest heart and you want to do the best with your nonprofit organization or you want to get recognized, there are bad things that happen. I tell my K-12 folks that I talk to often that there's always going to be some kind of food poisoning in the lunchroom. There's always going to be that fight that may or may not make it to YouTube. What you want to do is be in front of that and have already built a reputation of integrity, a reputation of right standing, so that when those things come, they're just another day's news that have no impact on your reputation or your legacy within your local community. Now that we have that settled, and I'll pause every now and again for questions so that it won't be a huge dump of information and then we get distracted. But I'm going to keep going for now. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat box. But now that we've established the importance of why we need our information out there in front of media, we want to go a little bit deeper to talk about the different types of media that are out there. You have what we call earned media, paid media, and owned media. Now, that earned media is simply how it sounds. It's that reporter who's willing to write that article on you and your organization because you sent out a press release or a media advisory, or because they heard from someone in the community how amazing your organization is. It's the same when it comes to reviews and testimonials, whether that's on social media where somebody leaves you a good review, or a Google review where someone has visited your space and they had a great experience. All of these things that are funneled or that start with someone else besides you or your organization, or what we call earned media. And then you have what we call paid media, which are your advertisements and your sponsorships and your mentions. We'll talk a little later about some organizations that actually provide free sponsorships or free advertisements for nonprofit organizations. But that number or that word paid when it comes to nonprofit isn't as scary as it sounds, especially when you have a local event coming up that's really important that it gets out to the right people. And then you have what we call owned media, and that is your website, that's your social media. Anything that you put out is what we call your own media that you have access to at all times and can change whenever you want it to. Now, I want to give y'all some examples. If you received my email, so I wouldn't take up too much time on my background, I primarily work in higher education, and we are always aiming to tell the story so that we can get more students into our doors. So throughout this presentation, I have a few examples of how we do that. This first one is a beginner story, as we call it, of students who thought about coming to college but had hangups or had issues to get there. So we will start this one and then we'll pick up on their story a little later.
Life doesn't wait for you. Ended up having a child and a family of my own. And by then, I still just had a high school education.
I was always scared of transitioning from high school to college.
I never knew exactly what I wanted to do when I was in high school.
I spent 21 and a half years in the military, and there's not a lot of call for that kind of work, reconnaissance and security in the civilian world. So I was struggling to find a job.
People want experience. You can't get experience while going to college.
I wasn't fully satisfied with my career.
I really thought I was too old to go to school.
Those stories are all too common all throughout the state, but each of those people, if you notice, represent a different demographic. And it's so important when we're getting our story out, especially through our owned media, that we do it in such a way that it impacts the folks that we want to see within our classrooms. And so I want you to think about that as we continue through this presentation. The people that you want to impact, figure out some of the best ways in your mind to reach those people, or at least figure out where they're at. And then we in the media profession are able to help you build it out from there. Moving on, now that we've established that we know that we need to be out there to tell our stories so that we can make the most difference, we want to learn how to tell that story based on learning who the media are within our local areas. So we want to learn how to speak the media language and learn the media culture so that they aren't ignoring the contents that we have. When you think of media, obviously that represents a lot of things, but some of the information that I'm going to give you today is specifically pointed toward these different entities: TV stations, magazines, local news sites, national PR news wires, which we can talk about a little more probably offline, because that can get interesting and how you do that. But a lot of the local stories that have national representation, whether it's ABC or CNN or Fox News, sometimes that information is paid content that you can have access to for a fairly reasonable price. So it's important just to think about what's out there and how you get your information to those different organizations. Now, there are different ways to submit media. I just told you a little bit about the different organizations or the different news wires that you can put information on. But locally, usually there's a general news email that you can send the information to that you have. And typically this general email is news at whatever the organization is. I'm from the Dothan area, so our general news email that everybody had access to was news@dothaneagle.com. eagle.com. So you want to make notes to look for each of those entities in your area and find out what that general news email is. You also want to take note of reporter contacts. A lot of newspapers and organizations have a website with all of their reporters listed, or typically you can click on their names in a news story and their contact information and what they do there actually come up. So that's an easy way to find out who your media personalities are. There are also digital calendars on these news sites, websites that you're responsible for with your own login and password, just like a portal to upload your own information. You can tag folks in social media to let them know that you have something going on. You also have press packages, which we'll talk about a little bit more in detail. And then the one thing that we tend to forget sometimes is that these organizations still have phones. So you can pick up a phone and give them a call and let them know about an event that you have coming up. Now, it's really important, as I was saying earlier, you have everybody trying to grab for media and media attention. So HubSpot, which is a really good resource to find out media data, has found that 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Mondays is one of the best times to get your information out to reporters. So if you have an event coming up on a Friday or within 2 weeks' time, your best success, according to HubSpot and some other organizations, is that 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Monday slot. Now, some things that you want to consider when you're submitting these things. I know I get a lot of hesitation from nonprofits about submitting too much information or too little information so that you're not ignored in the email. I believe that you submit just as often as you have something going on, but you want to consider each of these pieces when you're doing it. When it comes to timing, if you have a live event coming up, you want to schedule that within a reasonable time for TV reporters to get back to their stations, package it up, write their or present their video script and get it on the next time sessions news. So for example, if you have an event happening in the morning, 10 a.m. tends to be one of the best times to do that because it gives the TV reporters time to get back to the station and package that up and be on the 12 o'clock news in your area. If you have an event in the evening, we typically schedule things for about 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And then that way you have that same access to TV reporters. Now there's several other media, as we just talked about, your radio stations and some other ones that we'll go into detail about. But 10 a.m. in the morning and 2 p.m. in the afternoon are some good times to think about if you're having a live event that you want a reporter present to. You also want to think about the local calendar. If you have local events that are scheduled regularly within your community, you want to schedule other things around that and submit news that relates to it. I know a lot of people have festivals in their area. Well, if you have something that you want to host that's in line with that or that you want to get people to, go ahead and do it in conjunction. The one thing I do not recommend is hosting things that seem like they're in competition or in contrast to a big event that's already happening, because you don't want to take away from the donations or take away from the recognition that your organization could receive because of something that's already established. So if possible, keep in mind that the events that you schedule are in line with local calendars in respect to bigger events. Holidays are the same way. When it comes especially to that Thanksgiving and Christmas time, the news schedule is very, very slow. So if you have an event prior to or even day of, you want to give reporters a reasonable enough time to schedule that so that they can attend, because they have vacation too. And if they don't know that something is happening around that time, then you lose the opportunity to get as much media there as possible. On the flip side of that, you also want to realize that it is the holiday time. So if there is an event that can be scheduled at a different time throughout the year, then you want to plan that. I know I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and I remember when I was part of the Dothan chapter planning our annual scholarship event. we wanted to make sure that that was always in early December, because the closer you get to the holiday, when it comes to purchasing those tickets, the more people are thinking about their Christmas budget. So if you have something that has to happen within that time frame, please be considerate and respectful of the other things that are going on. Days of giving, we have national days of giving, and then some folks have local days of giving. There's a lot of digital stuff that goes on when it comes to your days of giving too. So if you have an event that can give you the most impact or maximize the donations that you can get at that time, plan on a day of giving. And then your own schedule. And I'm actually learning this the hard way right now. If you know that you're not going to be available to media at a certain time, don't plan something around there. You want to be as excellent and have as much integrity and respect as possible when you're starting to build that relationship. So you want to make sure that you're not conflicting with your own schedule when it comes to the things that you said that you are going to do. All right. Now that we had that general term, and I told y'all this was going to be heavy, so I hope that you're taking notes. And again, don't hesitate to ask questions. But now that we have that general idea of what media culture tends to center on, I want to go into a couple different medium to show you how they think or how they work. When it comes to thinking about your TV reporters, we already said that it's important to think about their air times so that you can be able to present at a certain time so that they can get it on that next airtime. You also want to be respectful and give them advance notice. Now, TV reporters tend to work a little more on the fly with breaking news than some of your newspaper reporters because they have a quicker turnaround, but they do respect that advance notice. It's just a matter of following up with them to make sure that they'll actually attend an event. As we said in the next point, you want to follow up, especially if it's a newsworthy event, just to make sure they're able to come before you actually have that event. Again, you want to think about your availability when it comes to inviting TV stations out. A lot of times they need to get in and out of something that you have going on. So if it's a press conference where you're announcing a huge grant that you were just awarded, or if there are people who have been impacted in your community by something big that's happening, you want to make sure that you have a slot for media that's a few minutes time of the big picture. Obviously, we love for them to stay at an hour-long banquet or an hour-long presentation, but sometimes that's just not practical. So you want to make sure that you're available so that folks can get in and get out and do their media show or do their media slot in time for their news broadcast. Now we want to talk about radio, and I believe, especially now that digital radio is so big, that radio, your FM and even your AM stations, are some of the most overlooked opportunities for nonprofits, because many of them are obligated, if not all of them, to have some PSAs, to have some public service announcements for free for local nonprofit organizations and the events that they have happening. And the one thing that we tend to forget is that even though a radio station reporter may or may not actually come out to an event, they can give you that airtime to not only advertise your event, but they also have a website that may put your news up even before the TV stations or the newspapers can. So it's very important that you find out what your radio stations are in your area, AM stations as well, and how you can best fit into their calendars. Even if it's a public service announcement telling about the services that you offer, telling about the new nonprofit that you started, it does not matter. It's very important that you think about radio stations just like you think about some of your other entities. Some more things to think about when it comes to your radio stations as well as with your media and with your newspapers is who those reporters are. You want to know who the personalities are that you're dealing with on a regular basis. If you have a reporter who you know only covers a certain kind of topic, you want to make sure that you have that person's number. When it comes to print, though, specifically, you want to think about those print times just like you think about those news slots. You have a lot of newspapers these days who don't print daily like they used to, but they may print 2 or 3 times a week. And many of them have those free sections where all they do is run local events and local public service announcements. And so if you have a newspaper anywhere within your region, think about that when it comes to sharing the information that you have going on. Even if it's something like an annual report that you want to point people to on your website or on your social media, those kinds of announcements can print and more than likely print for free so that more people know about what's going on. And I have a fun one that I want to share with you a little later. More so probably than your TV stations, you want to give your print and your news and your local magazines advance notice of what is going on because they do have to map out their schedule. And even though breaking news happens for everyone, that the time limit that uh, t- print reporters have, I'm sorry, is a little more flexible because they kind of map out their schedule around the local events. So it's not like TV, like I said. So anytime you have an event, even if it's a month or so in advance, you want to go ahead and get it on their calendar and then continue that conversation down the line. Again, we talked a little bit about how often to submit to your local markets. Always, 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 anytime you have something going on, make sure that that makes it to your local newspaper. Even if it's just a new hire or announcing who your board is or what your organization represents, they may or may not run it, but at least you're recognized and your presence is known. When it comes to follow up, you want to make sure that you have some quotes on standby from your president, maybe for your the chairman of your board, any kind of pull quotes, videos, and photos that you can just kind of have. Print media really, really appreciates that because while they may not always be able to send out a reporter, there's always room to get those kinds of things on their sites and in their local areas. All right. Now let's talk about digital media. This is our social media and our websites, even if you want to consider that a digital medium. You want to make sure when you're trying to get onto somebody else's social media that you skim their posting rules. I'm sure a lot of you may be members of maybe Facebook groups where you have to maybe answer a few questions before you can actually become part of the group. You want to respect what their guidelines are when it comes to how you post or how you share your information because you don't want to get booted out from one that you really appreciate. So make sure that you pay attention to those posting rules. You want to find those free news wires, even if it's not a national event. There's some organizations, EIN News Online, I think, is one where you can post and share different things that you have on certain parts of their sites. You want to share information with local partners. So I know United Way, especially, and even us in the community college system, have a tendency to tag stakeholders and tag partners in the things that we share so that they can pick up on it and let it flow however they want it to, whether it's in an article, whether it's an extra share where we can get more folks to follow or like a post. However you do that, you want to share the love. And then you also want to be able to provide videos and photos that they can use and post on their social media or their digital media, in addition to what you already have. Now, when it comes to thinking about these forms of digital media, you want to put your best branding forward. And we'll talk about that a little more, but you want to make sure that you're consistent in the things that you're putting out. So not the logo that somebody sitting next to you made up real quick so that you can put it out there. But you want to make sure that it's legit all the time. All right, so we've talked about the different organizations that you can get your information to. Now, what exactly do they want to know? I've given you some examples along the way. If you want to screenshot this one in particular, these are the kind of stories that really stick out to those local organizations, stories that make the most impact, that pull your heartstrings, that show that you're a legit organization, whether that's in the form of an annual report, things that folks can relate to or that they have in common with local organizations. All of these things are good points to bring about when it comes to the kind of news that they want. Again, here's just another one that you're welcome to screenshot that talks about different general stories that can go out there, whether it's the results of a campaign you ran, whether it's a grant that you recently received, a success story, any of these things that just make folks feel good. And then this is just another slide from some headlines that I pulled today that stick out. And none of these are heavy lifting, I can tell from the newspaper side. All of these things are easy grabs that each of you have probably done, whether it's donating to an organization, whether it's holding an annual event. Each of these things is within reach and an easy media grab for you. All right. And when we don't do the things that we just talked about, when it comes to the media and it comes to getting our articles out there, they lose respect for us, right? And nobody has time for that. We have people in our communities that we're out there trying to help, that we're trying to build up, and we don't have time to get snubbed by the media because they feel like we haven't respected what they've presented. With that said, I want to move into the other piece of our story in the community colleges, and there's one story that continues on and a couple more that are introduced just to show you the kinds of emotions and the kinds of stories that we go for when it comes to our students.
It's definitely been able to give me a head start on what college life is going to be like.
Going into college, it was like crazy because I was already ahead because of the dual enrollment. I didn't have to take certain classes.
You don't have these massive classes. It's more individualized, I think. I feel like you connect with your instructors more.
From the very first day, I had every instructor their personal phone number. They were very interested in making sure that we understood what we were doing.
Truly, if I had not gone to Enterprise State Community College and the resources there were not available, I don't know if I would have gone to college right off the bat. I certainly wouldn't be 2 years debt free.
We were able to create a schedule that allowed me to still get my hours at work while attending the class.
It was like a jump started. It just put me right back to where I was with my peers again.
So hopefully you see what I'm talking about. We started with their needs and what they need us to do, and then we continued on with how we could actually help them. And again, all this is a story that we told through video, through blogs, and that we continue to tell so that we can reach the right people to get into our classrooms. Now we'll go into another piece. We've kind of established what media is, what they want from us. Now internally, when it comes to releasing yourself or releasing your services out to the media, I want you to think of a few housekeeping things. And one of the most important things you'll need to remember is that your presentation matters. Your brand is the single most important investment you make in your business. And whether that's the logo and other things that we'll talk about, it's very important that that's consistent for you. A lot of times, if you have an organization that's bigger than 2 or 3 folks, and especially if they're positioned or contracted all over the region or all over the state or the country, you want to make sure that everybody is on the same page when it comes to your branding. You want to make sure that everybody knows what your logo is. You want to make sure that everybody knows what the hex codes, HEX codes are for the colors within your logo. So if you ever hire someone else who didn't do your logo to do a flyer or something for your event, that all of those things are in line and your brand is well represented. Another thing you want to do is make sure that your fonts are similar. Times New Roman obviously is a default in a lot of the things that we have. So if you want that to be part of your brand, that's fine. But make sure that everybody who puts out information regarding your brand is on the same page with the stuff they produce. One thing that we do often, because I work in higher education primarily for our community colleges, and we have 24 here in Alabama. We want to make sure that our branding and consistency is common everywhere. So one thing that we do is produce these things called toolkits. And we have those, if you see those logos on the side, whether you're using Dropbox or Google Drive or SharePoint, any of these things you can download your flyers and things in and make them customizable. So what you have here is a campaign we were doing on some ready to work programs that help promote our services to students who might not traditionally go to college. And we wanted to make sure, again, that we hit multiple demographics. We produced this content, put it in a toolkit, and made it available to every communications team within the community college system so that when they deliver that statewide message, that everybody was on the same page. And now, granted, they could put their own college emblem, college logo somewhere on the page. But it was very important that the main pieces of that campaign stayed intact. And this even applies to your merch, the merchandise. I know a lot of nonprofits may not have anything outside of the pins with their names on it, but on your proposal folders, your brochures, shirts, cups, anything that you have, your YouTube channel, even, you want to make sure that your branding is consistent so that the people who are looking for you know where you are and they know who you are. So, branding, I can't stress enough, is very, very important. Now, I don't see any questions yet, but we'll pause right here. We got about 20 minutes to go, but we'll pause right here if anybody has any questions so far. No? All right, y'all, we are going to keep trucking. So to the grand thing that we're all here for, we're going to start with our media advisories and our pressers, as Ms. Kiana said, our press release training. Media advisories and press releases are crucial when it comes to getting the media informed on what is coming up. And again, media advisories are the thing that you send out to let people know what's happening. Press releases are for a different thing, but it's very important that you don't get these things confused with each other because it'll sidetrack you and help you or cause you to miss some important folks that you want to reach out to. And I'm looking at my notes as I go to make sure I don't get ahead on this part because all of it is a big deal. When you're sending out a media advisory, this is yet another opportunity to put your branding out there, to let people know what your logo is or what your emblem is, as well as your contact information. And then more importantly, it digs deeper into a summary of what is about to happen. So even though it's not a full-fledged press release that lets you know everything that is going to happen that day, consider it like a teaser to let people know in advance. I know a lot of you might attend concerts in your local communities, or there might be some different funding drives coming up, prom dress drives, things like that. The way that you hear about those are via media advisories that have gone out to the local media entities to let them know that it's on its way. This is a very bland slide, but it's just an example of what a media advisory looks like, where it doesn't give them too much of what's happening, but it gives media a general idea of what's about to happen and strongly encourages them, without saying it, to actually come to what you have going on. Again, media advisories, you plan to schedule information versus actually telling people what is going on. And so it's very important that you put those in your mind to get out, typically within a couple weeks of an event. I like to do 2 weeks announcements. That's what I have planned for next week for an event we have. And then I do a week out with phone calls and follow-ups just to see who will be there. And then the day before, or a couple days before, I let folks know again what's happening. Your press release is your full-fledged platter, your entree of what's happening. It tells all of the details, everything that happened after the event. It includes quotes from stakeholders in case a news reporter wants to write their own story based off of what you provide. It includes quotes from people that were there and any kind of connecting info or call to action. So, say you had a fundraising drive in your community, it may have already happened, but somewhere in that press release, you can mention when upcoming events are coming up, or tell them where folks can go to donate. This is what we tend to call a call to action or any connecting info that you have. And then finally, your press releases tend to have what we call your boilerplate. If you've seen a press release, there's a little paragraph at the bottom that tends to say about organization. And that's where you would put your information. Um, Now, this is important. If you have an event that you actually want press at, you do not want to send that press release until immediately after the event, because if they have everything that they need on there already, they're probably not going to come. So you want to make sure that you keep that full press release written in advance, but not released until after the event. Now, another thing that's important when you're doing a press release is to aim to have at least 3 places that that press release goes. Some easy areas are always your own social media page, always your own website. And then that third piece we're hoping can be some kind of media agency, whether it's your newspaper, your radio station, or excuse me, or your TV station. You want to make sure that folks know what you have going on and that you haven't wasted time getting that out to the public. So any 3 places that you know that your audience is going to be, you want to make sure that you have your information out there. And this is just a general example. It's bits and pieces of a local organization here that's very successful in the nonprofit world. It's called Women in Training. And this was actually, I think, a sponsored ad on Facebook, where her picture is, where it just talked about the local event that they recently did. Now, if you look at that headline, "Wit served sandwiches, sweet tea, and a year of success at Grits Cafe," there doesn't seem like anything glamorous about that. But looking at the details that she provided in that article, from all the services that they've done prior to now, which can be that call to action or that connecting info, as well as that link to their annual report, all of these things make for amazing, amazing press coverage. And I believe there was quite a bit of press coverage when this actually came out. But most of the information that she's provided in this press release is information that they posted organically on their own pages, and the press just kind of caught wind of it and made a big splash on it. So a very successful effort and endeavor from that organization. Even their donations have increased significantly because of media coverage like this. Now, you follow up on media advisories and pressers the exact same way. Again, you're emailing, you're calling, not harassing, but reasonably setting a timeline to reach out to make sure that the media is getting the message that they need. In the process, you're also building up your media list, and you're making sure that you have thank you letters ready, you have phone numbers ready for the next time you have an event, in hopes that they'll think about you when they need a story, or when you want to go back out there and tell them what's going on. You want to create an FAQ. If you already don't have a frequently asked questions somewhere in the information, you want to make sure that you have that listed, or that you get some work done on that. And then from there, you want to build on the coverage and build on the momentum. And so if you have a really successful event, don't leave the media hanging. Start thinking already on something you can follow up on. And I see a question here. It says, how important is it to include validated statistics in a press release? It is very important to include validated information. Anything that's released out into the atmosphere, as I tell my speech students, can be caught and picked up by anybody. And it is one of the most embarrassing things to have to retract information that was not true after somebody researched it and found it. Now, it's one thing, it's still embarrassing embarrassing if you catch it yourself, but if somebody researches the information that you put out, say you've impacted 1,000 families in the local community, and they find out that none of that is true. Those are very embarrassing stories that you have to pull back. And so you want to make sure that that data that you're including, especially in your annual reports and your hard numbers, is as accurate as it can be. And hopefully that answered your question. If not, let me know and I'll take another stab at it. Um, Now that we're moving from the press release and the media advisories, I want you to think about the time that you really do need to ask for help. And we got about 10 minutes, so I'm going to zip through these in order to respect your time. There are some things that you can do probably amazing, but there are always those times that you want to be able to let the experts handle what they need. And no, this isn't a sales push or anything of the sorts, but truly something to think about when it comes to whether or not you need help in your media. What do you have that's printable? What do you have a one pager about your foundation or your organization that shares the different things that you're doing in the community, that shares the budget that you're working with or the funds that you're giving to local folks, or the resources that you're providing? If you don't, and you don't have anybody in your organization to produce that, that might be time for you to consider hiring an organization to help. Do you have a website? And is that website mobile friendly? This is a really, really big thing you want to think about. Do you have free resources that you can put in a flyer or a handout that hasn't been produced yet? Do you know how to manage media waivers when you're interviewing folks within the local community who have been impacted by your service? Are you handing them a waiver so that they can sign and say, hey, I'm not being paid for this. If I get sued or the organization gets sued, I'm not going to blame it on the organization. Do you have the knowledge about those different things? Is your branding consistent? And do you have someone who is media friendly? This is something I run into, especially in working with local animal shelters. This is no slight to them, but most people who work in shelters will admit that they're there because they don't like dealing with people on a regular basis. Well, how many times are you going to get the media to come out to a national, or not a national, but a local event that you're hosting to provide more resources to the animals that you care so much about if you barely even speak to them when they're there? So if you don't have someone media friendly in-house, you really want to think about hiring someone. And you have folks like marketing firms like NMM Group. This is definitely my plug for them because they are amazing, who are willing to assist you with those things. You have freelancers, spokespeople, graphic designers. And with graphic design, many times you can find someone at a local college who's willing to help with that. Brand ambassadors and volunteers, all who can help you get your media on point and in the direction that it needs to go. Now, with that said, I want to talk a little bit about tools and resources that you can use if you decide to go it alone. I won't go through each of these, but these are some of the top resources that I use, not only for research, but also for design, for shooting and editing video, and to find out information when it comes to what to post and when on social media. So if you want to screenshot that, some of these resources may be a huge help to you. And now, I did good, y'all. We're gonna finish up with some takeaways that you can use to really help you get your feet wet or get your feet grounded when it comes to getting media out there. Again, you want to have at least 3 touch points for every topic. Make sure when you're reaching out to media that it is absolutely worth it. So again, whether it's your social media, whether it's a website, whether it's a flyer that you're posting up in local communities to let them know about your services, make sure that every news item that you have has at least 3 opportunities to breathe or be out there in the community. Don't hesitate to spend a little to get a little. Some things really do cost money, but always check on free, like those public service announcements. Google actually does $10,000 sponsorships to nonprofit organizations. So if you Google that and figure out how to get your application in there, you might be one of those candidates who gets that $10,000 of free advertising all over Google and some of their resources. So always check on free resources. Build your contacts and your audience. Anytime you run into a reporter, please ask them for their card or their contact information. Heck, you can even take them out for coffee or something reasonable just to get to know them and find out the best ways to get in touch with them in the future. You also want to always respect your brand by staying consistent with your markings, your fonts, and all those things. You put a lot of work typically into picking those colors and that design, so respect it. And then finally, never stop learning. Always look for resources and groups that keep you up to date. Facebook is popping right now, and my friend Kiana actually hooked me up with Clubhouse and learning how to. Is that what it is? Clubhouse? Yeah. Learning how to get in those groups and just being able to listen to all those folks are super impactful. These are two events that are actually coming up that I emailed you links to. This nonprofit marketing summit happens this week. If you don't know what the Association of Fundraising Professionals is, then you need to get on this nonprofit marketing call, because the information they provide is excellent information. And I think they have more than 40 presentations. And then finally, one of the most amazing people that I've met within the last couple months, Mr. Christopher Thomas, is doing his own event where he's showing you how to attract those cash sponsors. And this is something that has been done. It's a real where he was able to get $250,000 in sponsorships within 90 days for an organization. And he's going to give you access to his secrets in that. I sent you the link to register for that, but if you want to screenshot this, you can see the link on how to register for it there too. And finally, I want to tell you the outcome of those students that I introduced you to at the very beginning. We talked about, again, what they needed, what they were looking for when they came to us. Then we talked about the services they received when they interacted with us. And now let's find their end game, their end story.
I graduated March the 5th, March the 7th, I was on the job.
One of the friends that I met in the class, we went to a job fair in Tuscaloosa, and we both came away with jobs.
I got an internship here at APR, which eventually led to getting hired on.
I don't have to go work at a job that I can't stand anymore. You know, just to pay the bills. Now I can go do something that I enjoy doing and still make a better living than what I was doing.
Before I graduated, I had interviewed with 4 different hospitals. I had job offers from 3 of the 4, and the 4th one called me back after I accepted the position here.
I mean, being 21, I have a paid off 2017 Mustang. I mean, that's probably not a lot to other people, but to me, that's, I got my own car now.
I hold down a mortgage, and I'm just 22.
You're gaining the work experience that employers are looking for on top of furthering your education and getting the degree that you seek.
I owe my career and the start of my career to Enterprise State Community College, because they laid those initial building blocks and that foundation for me.
It's not about being a degree mill. It's literally about setting you up for success, and if they can, getting you that employment that we all really want.
Those stories make me smile every time I play those videos, because we hear those stories from so many different folks all the time. With that said, we are finished with this presentation. Does anybody have any questions whatsoever that they want to ask to help you kind of get your feet wet in the media world?
Yes, I have a question.
Hey.
Hello. This is Keongi Austin. I'm with the Raymond Austin Memorial Foundation for Rural Families and Development. And we are in the process of changing how the IRS sent us something about we had to change because of how we receive our funds, we had to change the number. So instead of us being a 501c3, we'll be a 509 something. But with you went through when you were talking about the marketing person, what other information other than, like you said, the short one pagers? What should we have on those? Could you restate that or email us that?
Yeah, I can actually email you some of the ones that I've done. Some very critical things to always have on there is your contact information. You want to make sure that they know every means available. If you have a website, you want to make sure your website is on there. And then you want to make sure that you can easily, somebody can tell from looking at that one pager, the services that you offer. That not only is for grant purposes, if you're using that to tag onto a grant application or as a flyer in your local community, but also for reasons like that, when you think of donors, they want to know exactly what you do before they donate. In your little description there, you want to make sure that you have what kind of organization you are. I'm actually working with an organization like that now. What those codes or whatever are with the IRS designation, so that folks know what they're donating to. And if you have a portal where people can donate, you want to be able to have that information there as well. Now, do you have a website already?
Yes.
Okay, good. If you do, you already have like a donation portal where people can click to donate and
No, we haven't done that yet.
Okay, so think about that and think about the best way to deliver that. I know Square, I think, does a free site. You have Wix, some other places, Google Forms, which is how I did the registration from here, where you can kind of set some things up, even PayPal. The one thing I encourage people to do when they do that, though, is to shorten that link as short as possible. When you have somebody who's thinking about giving their money to something, they don't want to spend a whole lot of time having to retype what you sent on a piece of paper. So if you want to use a bit.ly link, which is bit.ly, base or Owly is the same. Basically, it shortens whatever your link is to your website so that somebody can easily go there and know how to donate and get it done pretty quickly. But those again are the main things: your contact information, how to donate, that IRS designation, as well as a clear representation of the services that you offer. Did that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, cool. And if you have any more, and I'll make a note to email you some examples that I've done. Does anybody else have any questions? Nope. Well, you can see my contact information here in City Magazine, as well as NMM Group's contact information there. If you think of anything along the way, please don't hesitate to reach out. I also encourage you to consider completing that survey that I'm going to send in just a few seconds to be entered into a drawing for me to help you out with your social media. I'll provide some swipe copy for a month's time. And then before we get off, I also want to award someone a free media analysis. And that was to the first person, we're going to say the second person who asked the question. And so that's you, Kianga. Thank you, ma'am. I'll get that information to you and look over all the media stuff that you have now and give you some feedback on it. That's the kind of stuff that I do, and I'm more than happy to. And again, thank Mr. Thomas for allowing me this opportunity to speak on his organization's behalf to share this information. You all have a good night and spread this information on. You take care, okay?
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.